Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply arrives, steady and undeniable. The people who hold true authority don't raise their voice. They raise their energy. Their presence alone changes the temperature of a room. Owning your calm isn't about detachment, it's about alignment. It's the quiet decision to stop letting emotion, noise, and validation dictate who you are. The art of inner authority begins where external approval ends. It's the shift from chasing recognition to embodying clarity. When you stop explaining yourself, you start leading yourself. You no longer compete with noise. You control the atmosphere through composure. Calm isn't emptiness. It's the most powerful state of awareness a person can carry. This is the authority built from inner stability, not outer dominance. It doesn't need an audience or applause. It comes from mastering your reactions, from trusting your intuition, from standing grounded when the world expects you to shake. In that quiet mastery, everything changes, conversations soften, decisions sharpen, and life begins to move around your energy instead of against it. That's not confidence, that's inner authority, the strength to lead without ever losing your peace. The still voice within you is not loud, but it is precise. It doesn't compete with the world's noise or demand recognition. It simply knows. It speaks in clarity, not in volume. Most ignore it because it doesn't shout, but those who learn to hear it begin to live with a different kind of strength, one that doesn't ask for permission to exist. This voice doesn't try to prove. It guides through quiet certainty. The world rewards reaction and noise. Yet inner authority grows in silence. When you listen deeply to that calm undercurrent within you, you stop living through borrowed opinions. You begin to sense direction that doesn't depend on validation. It's not arrogance that makes you unbothered, it's alignment. You no longer fight for space. You become space itself, steady and aware. To lead without permission is not to disregard others. It's to stop abandoning yourself. It means you no longer wait for external affirmation to move in truth. Your still voice carries the permission you've been seeking from the world. Once you hear it clearly, external approval loses its power. Real confidence is the quiet realization that you already have everything you were waiting for. The still voice isn't emotional, it's anchored. It speaks beneath the noise of impulse, under the weight of doubt. You can only hear it when the mind stops rushing to defend or explain. It often comes as a soft intuition, a subtle knowing that feels more like remembering than learning. It doesn't push, it invites, and in following it, you find the rhythm that life intended for you. This voice is not the ego, it's the witness behind it. The ego shouts for attention, needing to be right, needing to be seen. The still voice watches quietly, knowing that truth never hurries. The more you return to it, the more it becomes your compass. It doesn't promise comfort, but it guarantees clarity. And clarity, once chosen, transforms confusion into calm authority. Listening to your still voice requires trust. You won't always have evidence to prove it's right, yet it rarely fails. It doesn't reason in logic, but in wisdom. Sometimes it tells you to walk away from battles that the ego still wants to win. Other times, it urges you to stay silent when everyone else demands noise. That stillness is not withdrawal, it's power refined. The one who listens to their inner authority becomes difficult to manipulate. You can't be baited into chaos when you trust your calm more than someone else's urgency. You begin to see how easily the world mistakes noise for influence. But true influence moves from presence, not pressure. It's the silent strength of someone who no longer reacts to prove their worth. To live by that still voice is to lead without titles. Your energy starts speaking for you in your tone, your timing, your restraint. People begin to sense the steadiness in your words, the confidence in your pauses. You stop persuading and start embodying. That is leadership in its highest form, authority without aggression, impact without noise. The still voice teaches you how to preserve your peace while staying fully engaged with the world. You stop letting other people's chaos decide your rhythm. You learn to remain calm in conversations designed to provoke, patient in moments that test your boundaries. What once drained you now informs you. Stillness sharpens your perception, turning emotion into understanding. When you lead without permission, you become your own validation. You stop waiting for someone to acknowledge your effort or crown your worth. The quiet assurance that you're aligned becomes enough. You don't chase opportunities. You attract them by being immovable in purpose. You don't need to demand respect. Peace earns it naturally. Inner authority does not seek dominance. It creates balance. You can be firm without being harsh, assertive without being defensive. The still voice gives you timing when to speak, when to act, and when to stay silent. Each choice guided by it feels effortless because it isn't forced. You begin to move through life like water, calm on the surface, unstoppable underneath. This stillness does not mean the absence of feeling. It's the mastery of it. You continue to feel deeply, but you stop being ruled by those feelings. The still voice doesn't suppress emotion, it translates it. Anger becomes awareness, fear becomes focus, hurt becomes healing. The alchemy of emotional authority happens inside that quiet understanding. The still voice doesn't compete for attention. It simply waits until you're ready to hear. It's been speaking beneath every anxious thought, every forced decision, every moment you felt disconnected. Its message is simple. You are already enough. Every time you pause long enough to listen, you dissolve another layer of self-doubt. As your connection to this inner wisdom deepens, your decisions begin to change. You stop moving from impulse and start moving from alignment. You no longer waste energy convincing others to see your vision. You walk it calmly until it becomes undeniable. The still voice doesn't push outcomes, it prepares you to meet them. When you live guided by this voice, control stops being external. You're no longer reactive to situations because you trust your inner direction. The circumstances may shift, but your awareness stays centered. This detachment doesn't make you distant, it makes you decisive. Stillness teaches you to choose peace even when chaos insists otherwise. The power of the still voice lies in its consistency. It doesn't fluctuate with mood or circumstance. While the mind jumps between noise, the still voice remains unchanged, a quiet presence that holds truth even when everything else feels uncertain. You learn that stability is not found in what you control, but in what you return to. In moments of pressure, the still voice becomes your anchor. It slows your reaction long enough for wisdom to catch up. It reminds you that not every challenge is meant to be met with effort. Some are meant to be met with awareness. The pause between feeling and action becomes your strongest form of intelligence. The more you follow the still voice, the less you need to seek direction from others. Advice becomes secondary to intuition. You begin to understand that authority doesn't come from dominance, it comes from discipline. It's the discipline of listening inward before moving outward. Every act becomes more intentional, every word more grounded. This inner leadership changes how you see success. You stop chasing outcomes that exhaust you and start pursuing alignment that sustains you. Peace becomes your definition of progress. The still voice keeps you humble in victory and patient in delay. It reminds you that your worth is not measured by applause, but by inner steadiness. And as your awareness deepens, you realize the truth: the still voice never needed to be earned or found. It was never silent. It was simply waiting for you to quiet enough to hear it. That is the art of inner authority, to walk through life, led not by the world's permission, but by the wisdom that has always lived quietly within you. The world moves faster than ever before. Everyone is running towards something: validation, success, distraction, without realizing that motion isn't the same as progress. To stand unmoved in such a world is not laziness, it's mastery. It means refusing to let the external pace dictate your internal rhythm. You begin to understand that calmness is not stillness, it is movement with awareness. Standing unmoved doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop reacting to everything that tries to control your energy. The world will always test your balance with urgency and comparison. It will whisper that you are late, that you must do more. But when you stay centered, you remember that what's real never needs rushing. What's meant for you will not leave because you slowed down to breathe. The discipline of staying grounded in a rushing world begins with observation. You start noticing how speed controls people, how anxiety wears the mask of ambition, how noise replaces thought. You stop chasing moments just to avoid being present. Stillness becomes your rebellion against a culture that mistakes chaos for importance. When you no longer move from fear of missing out, you begin to move from awareness of what matters. Life stops feeling like a race and becomes a rhythm. Every decision slows to the pace of intention. You see how much energy you once wasted trying to match the world's speed, only to realize that clarity was waiting in the pauses you kept skipping. Standing unmoved doesn't mean resisting change, it means flowing through it with balance. You stop clinging to control and start trusting direction. The storms still come, but they can't uproot you anymore. You've grown roots too deep for that. Your calmness stops being fragile. It becomes structural. You learn that reacting fast rarely equals responding well. The rushing mind assumes it knows. The still mind understands. The world celebrates quick decisions, but the wise learn that timing is more powerful than speed. To wait until understanding arrives is not delay, it's discipline. It's how patience turns into precision. The pressure to move faster is constant. Everyone wants the next thing before finishing the current one. But inner authority means walking through life with the confidence that you can't be rushed out of your rhythm. You start measuring success not by how much you do, but by how deeply you do it. Slowness becomes your superpower in a culture that confuses rest with weakness. Stillness doesn't isolate you, it liberates you. When you stop rushing, you begin to notice the texture of things, the sound of your breath, the tone of voices, the subtleties of truth. Awareness opens up when attention slows down. You see more because you're finally looking. The world didn't change, your pace did. Standing unmoved also means protecting your emotional center. Not every urgency deserves your energy, and not every invitation deserves your response. You start filtering chaos before it enters your system. You stop solving problems that don't belong to you. Boundaries become not walls, but filters that protect your clarity from other people's confusion. The unmoved person carries an aura of calm authority. They don't need to rush to prove control. They already embody it. People sense that energy. It feels like safety. When everyone else is racing, your steadiness becomes magnetic. In a world obsessed with movement, stillness feels like confidence. To remain unmoved is not to stay untouched. You still feel, still care, still engage, but from balance, not reaction. You realize that emotion can flow through you without owning you. Calmness becomes a lens, not a shield. You stop shutting down under pressure, you expand beyond it. This is emotional maturity, to stay soft without losing structure. The art of standing still in a rushing world is the art of remembering that peace is not situational. If calmness depends on the absence of noise, it is not calmness, it is avoidance. Real peace lives inside chaos and remains untouched. You don't wait for silence, you bring silence into movement. That's what makes you unshakable. To stand unmoved is to understand time differently. You stop measuring your worth by how fast you arrive. You start trusting divine timing not as a passive idea, but as active alignment The right things don't arrive when you rush. They arrive when you're ready to receive them. Readiness requires stillness, not speed. The more you practice being unmoved, the more you notice how urgency tries to seduce you. It hides behind opportunity, behind expectation, behind fear. But the inner self knows the truth: rushing never leads to peace. The things meant for you unfold naturally when you stop pushing and start listening. The unmoved mind doesn't panic when things slow down. It uses the space to reflect, to recalibrate, to restore direction. The pause becomes progress. You realize that stillness is not stagnation, it's preparation. Every quiet season is a foundation being built beneath what the eyes can't yet see. Standing unmoved requires confidence in your intuition. The rushing world will question your pace, but you'll begin to feel peace in not explaining it. You know what's unfolding can't be forced. The slow work of inner authority may not impress others, but it builds something speed never could: depth. As your stillness deepens, your perception sharpens. You begin sensing people's intentions before they speak, feeling the energy of situations before they happen. Awareness grows in the space that hurry once occupied. You lead better because you listen longer. You decide better because you pause first. To stand unmoved doesn't mean never acting, it means acting only when aligned. You stop being pulled by impulse and start being guided by presence. Every step becomes deliberate, every word intentional. The world still moves fast, but you've learned to move slow enough to stay awake. This is how strength evolves, not by pushing harder, but by standing clearer. The unmoved person is not detached, they are directed. They don't resist life's current, they float with it, anchored in awareness. They no longer measure life by motion, but by meaning. And as you live from this balance, the world's pace no longer intimidates you. You become like a mountain in the wind, surrounded by motion, yet untouched by it. You lead from calmness, not control. You influence through stillness, not struggle. That is what it means to stand unmoved in a world that rushes. Presence carries a power that words often weaken. It doesn't rely on persuasion or performance, it simply times is. Asterisk. When you walk into a room grounded in awareness, your energy begins to communicate before your mouth does. That still confidence can settle tension, disarm hostility, and command attention without effort. It's not dominance, it's depth. The world may value clever speech, but presence remains the oldest and most convincing language of all. Arguments often arise from insecurity, the need to be seen, to be right, to win. But presence has nothing to prove. It speaks through composure, through how you listen, how you breathe, how you respond without haste. When others try to argue from emotion, your calmness becomes your statement. The quieter you become, the clearer you sound. Words are easy to produce. Presence takes discipline. It requires the ability to stay centered while others lose themselves in noise. You stop reacting to tone and start reading intention. You start understanding that not every conversation needs your defense. Some only need your awareness. Silence, when rooted in self-control, becomes the loudest reply. The energy of presence is unmistakable. It's not in posture or expression, but in vibration, a grounded stillness that others can feel. You don't interrupt to be understood. You let understanding arrive on its own. That patience creates respect without demand. The strongest message you ever deliver may come without a single word spoken. To cultivate presence is to train attention. It means being fully times here, times instead of lost in thoughts, rehearsals, or reactions. When you're truly present, people feel seen, not managed. They sense you're not waiting for your turn to speak, you're listening. Presence makes others open up because it carries no resistance. It gives space instead of taking it. Arguments often fail not because people are wrong, but because no one is listening. Everyone is speaking to be heard, not to understand. When you stay present, you change that rhythm. You become the calm that slows the storm. Awareness is contagious. Others begin to match your pace. Without forcing anything, you start leading through example. Presence is truth without explanation. It doesn't try to convince, it simply aligns. The more connected you are to your own stillness, the less you need to defend it. In stillness, there's no urgency to prove a point, only clarity about what is worth speaking into and what deserves your silence. This discernment saves energy and preserves peace. Every argument is an invitation to lose balance. Presence is the art of declining that invitation with grace. It doesn't mean withdrawal. It means choosing your frequency. You can engage without being pulled. You can respond without reacting. You can speak from clarity instead of emotion. This kind of self-mastery confuses chaos, because chaos feeds on attention, not awareness. To be present in conflict is to see beyond the surface. You notice that anger hides pain, that resistance hides fear. You begin to understand that people rarely argue for truth, they argue for identity. When you see that, compassion replaces competition. You no longer need to win, you aim to understand. That shift alone can end battles before they begin. Presence has its own gravity. It draws respect without demand and peace without compromise. When you live anchored in awareness, people can feel it. You don't compete to be right. You embody rightness through balance. Your composure becomes your credibility. The one who remains calm gains the influence that shouting never could. When presence leads, ego fades. You stop defending your reputation and start protecting your energy. You don't chase validation because you've learned that the calm truth of being is louder than approval. Presence reminds you that influence isn't about control, it's about coherence. The more aligned you are, the more naturally people listen. The secret of presence is attention that doesn't wander. The mind that stays where the body is becomes magnetic. You start noticing life as it unfolds instead of analyzing it in delay. That immediacy gives your words precision and your actions power. The world doesn't need more arguments, it needs more people fully times here. Asterisk. In presence, even silence becomes instruction. When you pause before answering, it teaches patience. When you stay calm amid provocation, it teaches strength. When you listen deeply, it teaches respect. People learn from your energy before they ever process your language. This is influence beyond intellect. It's emotional clarity embodied. You begin to realize that your reactions used to dilute your message. The louder you argued, the less you were heard. But now, your stillness carries more volume than your voice ever did. You no longer seek to overpower. You allow truth to stand on its own. Presence doesn't fight for space, it creates it. When you are fully present, you sense the subtle tone, energy, shifts in emotion. You begin responding to what's times beneath time's words, not just what's said. That's how empathy turns into intelligence. You don't need to be right because you can now feel what's real. That kind of awareness speaks louder than reasoning ever could. Presence transforms relationships. It allows others to feel understood without defense. You don't use silence as punishment, but as peace. You stop interrupting connection with impatience. In your stillness, people find permission to soften. They mirror your calm instead of reacting to your reaction. The space you hold becomes healing. Presence doesn't seek attention. It commands it through authenticity. The world has grown tired of noise disguised as knowledge. When someone embodies quiet confidence, it resonates instantly. You become memorable not for what you said, but for what others times felt times in your presence. That is the kind of authority words cannot manufacture. To practice presence is to surrender urgency. You stop needing to prove your value and begin living it. You realize that every moment is already full. It doesn't need your rush to complete it. When you slow down enough to see, life reveals its natural harmony. You start responding from truth instead of from defense. The deeper your presence, the fewer your arguments. You no longer need to explain peace. You demonstrate it. You stop trying to win through intellect and start connecting through energy. Stillness becomes your language, patience your tone, and awareness your proof. This is not silence born of fear, it's silence born of understanding. Presence becomes your greatest argument. It doesn't persuade, it transforms. It turns conflict into comprehension, noise into depth, and interaction into connection. The one who leads with awareness doesn't speak to be right, they simply embody what truth feels like. And that energy, unforced and unspoken, is what changes everything. Grace without boundaries becomes exhaustion, and boundaries without grace become walls. The art of inner authority lies in balancing both knowing when to open your heart and when to protect your peace. The world often teaches you to choose between kindness and strength, but real power is the ability to embody both at once. Grace gives compassion its softness. Boundaries give it structure. Together, they form the architecture of self-respect. Grace is not weakness. It's understanding without surrendering your worth. It's the ability to see through someone's pain without letting it drown your clarity. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the shape love takes when it learns to protect itself. To live gracefully is to stay kind without being consumed, to offer empathy without abandoning self-awareness. Balancing these two forces begins with awareness, the recognition that peace must be maintained, not assumed. You start noticing when giving turns into losing, when helping turns into self-neglect. Grace invites connection. Boundaries preserve it. Without boundaries, grace burns out. Without grace, boundaries harden into distance. The wise heart learns to blend them like breath, soft but steady. You can forgive and still refuse access. You can understand and still walk away. Grace sees people clearly. Boundaries decide where they belong in your life. This isn't about punishment, it's about proportion. It's the quiet confidence to say, I wish you well, but I won't lose myself trying to carry what isn't mine. Grace teaches you to see humanity in others. Boundaries teach you to honor the humanity in yourself. When you forget one, you lose balance, either becoming too open or too guarded. The goal is neither perfection nor coldness, but harmony. A kindness that flows from strength, not fear. This is where love matures into wisdom. Setting boundaries is an act of honesty. It says, this is how far I can give without breaking. It's not resistance, it's recognition. The more honest you become about your limits, the more peaceful your relationships become. Grace then turns those boundaries into something gentle, not a line of rejection, but a line of respect. People often mistake boundaries for distance because they're not used to clarity that doesn't come with guilt. But when you stand firm with softness, you teach others how to meet you with the same respect. Grace keeps boundaries from becoming ego. Boundaries keep grace from becoming self-sacrifice. One gives warmth, the other gives shape. Grace allows you to forgive without reopening wounds. It's the art of letting go without resentment. You don't need closure when you have compassion. You don't need revenge when you have understanding. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning. That's where boundaries speak. They protect the peace that forgiveness built. In leadership, in love, in friendship, the balance of grace and boundaries defines your energy. People feel safe around someone who knows how to stay kind without collapsing. Your calmness becomes trustworthy. Your presence dependable. You no longer absorb chaos to prove your care. You stay steady to offer true support. Grace teaches patience. Boundaries teach priorities. Grace says, I'll give you time. Boundaries say, but not at the cost of my peace. Together, they turn relationships into conscious choices rather than emotional reactions. You begin to give from fullness, not emptiness. You no longer pour from a leaking cup. You fill, then share. It takes strength to stay kind in a world that confuses empathy with weakness. Grace lets you respond to unkindness without matching it. Boundaries let you stop tolerating what disrespects your peace. You can walk away silently and still wish someone well. That combination of strength and serenity is the mark of emotional maturity. Grace without awareness can become enabling. You might start excusing behavior that depletes you, mistaking tolerance for love. But love with wisdom has boundaries. It doesn't allow comfort to destroy growth. It holds others accountable without cruelty. It says, I see your potential, but I won't harm mine to help you find it. Boundaries can feel uncomfortable because they demand that you honor yourself even when others don't. But that discomfort is healing, disguised as guilt. Each time you enforce a boundary gently, you remind yourself that peace is not selfish, it's sacred. Grace then softens the edges of that firmness, turning it from armor into integrity. Balance also means knowing when to release control. Grace accepts what you can't change. Boundaries define what you won't allow. You stop trying to fix others and start guiding energy toward what you can nurture. It's the difference between compassion and attachment. One flows freely, the other holds too tightly. You learn that saying no can be an act of love. It keeps you honest about your capacity. Grace makes that no sound kind. Boundaries make it sound clear. Together, they allow truth to travel without harm. You don't need to justify your peace, only protect it. The balance of grace and boundaries begins to show in your energy. People feel it. They know you're kind, but not naive. Open, but not unguarded. You give space without disappearing. Love without losing yourself. The quiet power of this balance radiates more authority than any argument ever could. When you master this balance, you stop choosing between peace and strength. You become both. You stop over-explaining your choices because they come from alignment, not emotion. Grace guides your tone. Boundaries guide your direction. The two together make you unshakable, not through control, but through coherence. Every interaction becomes easier once you carry this awareness. You no longer overextend or overreact. You stay centered, soft-spoken, and self-assured. Grace makes you approachable. Boundaries make you respected. People no longer confuse your kindness for permission. You no longer confuse love for self-abandonment. Balancing grace and boundaries is a lifelong practice, one that turns chaos into clarity. It's how you stay compassionate in a world that rewards hardness, and strong in a world that mistakes noise for power. It's the subtle art of giving without losing, forgiving without returning, and caring without collapsing. And as this balance becomes part of your nature, you begin to move differently, lighter, clearer, freer. You speak less, yet your words carry weight. You give more, yet remain full. You no longer bend to be kind or harden to be safe. You live where grace and boundaries meet, the calm space of inner authority, where peace becomes your natural state. Groundedness is not about staying still, it's about staying centered. It's the invisible strength that keeps you steady while the world tilts. When others lose themselves in noise, confusion, or emotion, being grounded allows you to hold your truth without wavering. You stop being swept into every storm, not because you're indifferent, but because you understand that chaos only has power over those who enter it. Being grounded begins with self-awareness. It's knowing where your energy starts and where the world's noise begins. You start noticing how easily people react from projection, how fear disguises itself as anger, how insecurity becomes arrogance. The grounded mind doesn't join the performance. It sees beneath behavior into intention. Awareness becomes your protection. When others are unstable, the grounded person becomes a mirror of calm. You don't need to fix their emotion. You simply refuse to feed it. In doing so, you create space for clarity to re-enter the room. Grounded energy doesn't argue, it absorbs tension and releases understanding. That's how peace begins to lead, without speaking. Staying grounded doesn't mean being detached from emotion. It means letting emotion move through you without staying. You feel the wave rise, but you no longer drown in it. You understand that feelings are visitors, not rulers. Your stillness becomes the ocean they pass through, vast, deep, unbroken. People will project their instability onto you, testing your center. They may rush, provoke, or complain, hoping to pull you into their current. But the grounded soul doesn't respond with resistance. It responds with clarity. You don't match energy. You manage it. You become a quiet reminder that peace is not something to find, but something to return to. Groundedness gives your presence weight. You stop speaking to be heard and start speaking to bring order. Your tone softens but sharpens in meaning. You don't have to raise your voice. Calmness amplifies your authority. People trust those who remain steady when everyone else shakes. That steadiness is influence without force. To stay grounded, you must learn to slow your inner rhythm. The world moves fast, but your awareness must move slow. When your breath is calm, your thoughts become clear. When your mind is clear, your actions become deliberate. Grounded people don't rush. They act from alignment. Their timing feels natural, not controlled. Groundedness grows in silence. It's not built in comfort, but in moments that test your balance. You start grounding yourself through still habits, deep breathing, solitude, mindfulness, reflection. The more time you spend within your own energy, the less you depend on the world to stabilize you. You stop reacting to chaos and start regulating it. When others are loud, the grounded person listens. When others panic, the grounded person breathes. You start understanding that stillness is not avoidance, it's wisdom in motion. You know when to engage and when to withdraw. You realize that your peace is too valuable to spend on every storm that passes your way. Being grounded also means being honest about your limits. You can't be everyone's calm if you abandon your own. You must protect your energy as carefully as you offer it. The grounded person helps others not by absorbing their chaos, but by modeling what balance looks like. You don't carry people's emotions, you hold space for them to find their own. The world often mistakes groundedness for indifference, but it's the opposite, it's depth. The grounded person feels everything. They've just learned how not to become everything they feel. They stand in empathy without being consumed by it. Compassion becomes presence, not exhaustion. That's how you keep your heart open without losing your mind. In relationships, groundedness is the quiet anchor that keeps connections safe. When emotions rise, one calm presence can reset the whole dynamic. You don't compete for control, you create space for understanding. Grounded communication means responding with awareness instead of reacting with defense. It's not about being right, it's about staying real. When you're grounded, you stop letting external validation shake your sense of worth. Praise no longer inflates you, and criticism no longer deflates you. You find neutrality in truth, the realization that your peace is not up for negotiation. You carry yourself with quiet confidence that doesn't require explanation. Groundedness also transforms how you deal with uncertainty. You stop chasing answers from fear and start trusting the process from calm. The grounded mind knows that control is an illusion. The only real stability comes from awareness. You learn to stay steady even when clarity hasn't yet arrived. That patience becomes your strength. When everyone around you reacts, your non-reaction becomes leadership. People sense that you are not running from fear, but walking through it consciously. You don't deny chaos, you navigate it. That composure earns respect silently because stillness always reveals who's truly in control. The practice of being grounded is daily. It's in how you breathe before you speak, how you pause before you decide, how you stay aware when provoked. You learn to anchor yourself not in opinions, but in truth. You stop attaching your peace to outcomes and begin anchoring it in presence. The power of groundedness is subtle but transformative. It changes how people experience you. Your energy calms rooms. Your silence restores order. Your presence invites trust. People may not know why they feel safe around you, they just do. That's the unseen strength of someone who has mastered their inner gravity. When others lose themselves in noise, you stay connected to the quiet pulse beneath everything. You start to see how much power lies in not reacting, in holding the pause that others fill with panic. You learn that silence can solve more than argument ever could. Groundedness turns chaos into choreography. Being grounded stops feeling like effort, it becomes identity. You no longer try to stay calm, you times are times calm. You don't try to lead, you naturally do. Your awareness becomes your stability, your breath, your anchor. You realize that you don't need to control storms, only yourself. And in that realization, you discover the essence of true power, not the ability to change others, but the ability to remain whole while the world trembles. You no longer bend to chaos, you center within it. The grounded mind doesn't conquer the storm, it becomes the sky above it, vast, still, and endlessly clear. Influence begins where self-trust is born. It's not built on persuasion, control, or charisma. It grows from the quiet certainty that your intuition can be relied upon. The people who move others most deeply are those who are not moved by doubt within themselves. Self-trust is the soil where confidence grows, where authenticity takes root, and where authority stops needing to prove itself. The world often mistakes influence for image, yet image fades when pressure rises. Real influence is invisible. It's the presence of someone who doesn't question their alignment. When you trust yourself, your words carry weight without effort. You stop performing confidence and start embodying it. The energy of self-assurance speaks louder than explanation ever could. Self-trust begins with keeping promises to yourself. Every time you follow through on what you say you'll do, even in silence, you strengthen your inner foundation. Each commitment fulfilled becomes a signal to your mind that you can depend on your own direction. Over time, that reliability transforms doubt into quiet conviction. To influence others, you must first influence your own energy. You cannot guide from instability. People sense when your words and your presence don't align. But when you trust yourself, coherence radiates from you. It's felt in the steadiness of your tone, in the pause before your response, in the unspoken confidence of someone who doesn't rush for approval. Self-trust doesn't mean arrogance. It's not the refusal to learn, it's the refusal to betray your knowing. You remain open to wisdom, but anchored in discernment. You can listen deeply without losing your own voice. You no longer surrender your intuition to the loudest opinion in the room. That balance creates the kind of influence that is magnetic, not manipulative. Doubt will always try to disguise itself as logic. It will whisper that others know better, that your intuition can't be trusted without evidence. But evidence comes after alignment, not before it. When you take one step guided by self-trust, life meets you with confirmation. Waiting for certainty before moving is how most people stay stuck. Influence built on self-trust doesn't need validation. It doesn't chase followers or applause. It moves from conviction, not consensus. People are drawn to those who move with purpose, because purpose feels safe. You start leading naturally, not through demand, but through direction. Your certainty becomes a compass for others still learning to hear their own. Self-trust deepens through stillness. When you quiet external noise long enough, your inner voice grows louder. That voice doesn't speak in fear, it speaks in clarity. It doesn't give reasons, it gives recognition. You begin to sense that your intuition has been right far more often than your doubt ever was. When you trust yourself, your relationship with failure changes. You stop fearing mistakes because you see them as feedback, not rejection. Each setback strengthens discernment. You realize that self-trust isn't the belief that you'll never fall. It's the knowing that you'll always rise correctly. Resilience becomes the language of your confidence. Influence is born not from the need to be followed, but from the ability to stand alone. The person who trusts their own path doesn't compete for direction. Their calmness becomes contagious because it's real. You start inspiring not through teaching, but through example, through the ease of someone who knows their place in the flow of things. To develop self-trust, you must first unlearn the habit of outsourcing truth. The more you seek answers outside yourself, the more your inner compass weakens. Reclaiming that power means trusting your perception even when others question it. The deeper your connection with your own awareness, the less external approval controls your movement. The foundation of self-trust is honesty, radical honesty with yourself. It means acknowledging when you're afraid, when you're uncertain, when you're pretending. You stop lying to yourself to fit expectations. In that raw transparency, you meet your true self, and that self, once recognized, cannot be shaken by outside judgment. Influence that stems from self-trust doesn't pressure others. It doesn't demand loyalty or obedience. It invites alignment. You lead not through control, but through authenticity. People follow not because you tell them to, but because your clarity reminds them of their own potential. That's the quiet revolution of inner authority. The more you practice self-trust, the quieter your mind becomes. You no longer debate every decision endlessly. The noise of second-guessing fades, replaced by the peace of knowing you'll handle whatever unfolds. That serenity reads as confidence to the world, but to you, it's simply awareness in motion. Self-trust also changes how you communicate. You stop over-explaining and start expressing. Your words become fewer, sharper, more grounded. You don't rush to fill silence with justification. The pause becomes your punctuation, calm, deliberate, powerful. Influence grows not from more words, but from the weight behind the few that matter. In leadership, self-trust is the invisible force that turns uncertainty into direction. People follow those who stand steady in fog, not those who panic for light. When your inner compass stays intact, you become the calm in which others find clarity. You don't demand trust, you evoke it, simply by being rooted in your own. Building self-trust takes patience. It's a slow, private process, a collection of small promises kept in quiet moments. Every "I will" that becomes "I did" adds a layer of strength beneath the surface. One day, you realize you no longer need reassurance. Your own consistency has become proof enough. When you fully trust yourself, life stops feeling like a test. Decisions become cleaner, relationships become simpler. You no longer chase certainty, you move from presence. Influence becomes effortless, not something you do, but something you are. The calm within you begins to move the world around you. The person who trusts themselves cannot be manipulated. They can be advised, but not swayed, guided, but not controlled. Their peace is their protection, their clarity, their compass. They move with purpose while others wait for permission. Self-trust becomes their leadership language, wordless, timeless, true. And as you walk this path, you understand the essence of real influence. It's never about power over others. It's about power within yourself. The world doesn't follow those who shout the loudest, but those who stand the stillest. The roots of influence are buried in the soil of self-trust, and once planted there, they cannot be uprooted. True command is not born from force, it flows from composure. The calm mind doesn't need to dominate, it influences through stillness. It doesn't lead with fear or demand obedience. Instead, it creates an atmosphere of clarity so strong that others naturally align with it. This kind of power doesn't rush or react. It holds presence so steady that confusion begins to organize itself around it. Control is the illusion of safety. Many chase it because they fear uncertainty. But the calm mind doesn't seek to control, it seeks to understand. It knows that control restricts while awareness releases. The moment you try to grip every outcome, peace slips through your fingers. But when you let go of control and anchor in presence, life begins to respond to your energy, not your effort. The calm mind is not emotionless, it's emotionally intelligent. It feels everything without being ruled by anything. It can hold intensity without breaking, conflict without hostility. You stop fighting for peace and start moving times from time's peace. That shift in energy changes how you experience every challenge. You no longer collapse under pressure, you regulate it. A calm mind commands because it's trustworthy. Others sense your steadiness even before you speak. They feel safety in your energy, knowing you won't be pulled into chaos or reaction. When you can remain still while others spin, you become the natural center, not by demand, but by gravity. Influence grows silently in the one who doesn't need to prove control. Commanding without control means leading through presence, not power. You stop forcing outcomes and start cultivating direction. People respond not to how much you push, but to how clear you are. A calm mind communicates certainty even in uncertainty. It doesn't try to convince, it simply moves with conviction. The calm mind practices patience as power. You wait without anxiety and act without panic. You no longer need to rush decisions to feel secure. That unhurried nature makes your actions feel deliberate and sharp. The calm mind trusts the rhythm of time, knowing that wisdom often arrives in the pause between impulse and action. When you stop trying to control, you start connecting. You listen deeper, speak slower, and see clearer. The calm mind is not distracted by appearances, it reads energy. It hears what people mean beneath what they say. This awareness transforms your influence because you begin responding to truth, not tension. Calmness doesn't mean avoiding pressure. It means mastering your nervous system in it. You can walk through conflict without becoming part of it. You can see intensity without absorbing it. Your calmness becomes a stabilizer in any environment. It's not a shield of indifference. It's a state of inner leadership. The mind that commands without control moves with subtle authority. It doesn't chase attention, it draws it. You speak less, yet people listen more. You act slower, yet results come faster. Why? Because clarity multiplies efficiency. The calm mind wastes no energy on resistance. It channels everything into precision. To reach this state, you must train awareness to stay steady. Meditation, reflection, and silence are not escapes. They're sharpening tools. In silence, you learn to recognize the difference between reaction and response. You realize how often people lose power by speaking too soon. The calm mind finds strength in the pause. Command is a reflection of coherence. When your inner world is balanced, your outer influence becomes effortless. People sense alignment before they hear words. When your energy is scattered, control becomes compensation. But when your mind is calm, everything aligns around you without coercion. Stillness becomes strategy. Letting go of control doesn't mean surrendering to chaos, it means trusting the intelligence of life. The calm mind knows that every situation carries its own rhythm. You stop forcing timing and start flowing with momentum. In that flow, opportunities unfold naturally. Not because you demand them, but because you're ready to receive them. The calm mind also commands through empathy. It doesn't manipulate emotion. It understands it. You can lead others because you no longer need to dominate them. Influence built on understanding lasts longer than control built on fear. When people feel seen and safe in your presence, they begin to trust your guidance naturally. Control tries to manage people. Calmness inspires them. You can't command genuine loyalty through authority, only through authenticity. The calm mind doesn't micromanage outcomes. It models alignment. It shows others what peace looks like in motion. And when people witness that kind of steadiness, they start aligning their energy to match it. To maintain a calm mind, you must learn to regulate your internal storms. Breath becomes your anchor, awareness your compass. You stop letting external noise decide your emotional temperature. The world can spin in urgency, but you remain a quiet axis of stability. That is the essence of silent command, unshaken, unhurried, unwavering. The more you embody calmness, the more life mirrors it back. Circumstances begin to unfold with less resistance. You find yourself attracting cooperation instead of conflict, flow instead of friction. This isn't magic, it's resonance. The calm mind creates harmony because it no longer competes with the moment. Leadership built on calmness doesn't seek followers, it awakens them. You start empowering others to find their own stillness. Your energy reminds them that peace is not passivity, it's clarity in motion. True influence uplifts rather than controls, connects rather than commands. When your mind is calm, control becomes unnecessary. You see that leadership isn't about directing every detail, it's about holding a vision and trusting the flow of alignment. The calm mind leads through example, not instruction. It becomes a living demonstration of harmony amid unpredictability. Over time, calmness stops being a practice and becomes your nature. You no longer need to force stability. You are times stability. You stop chasing control because you finally understand you never needed it. Command is not about holding tighter, it's about standing truer. And as the world keeps rushing, you remain the quiet force that organizes it, not through power, but through presence. That is the calm mind's true command. The ability to guide without grasping, to move without forcing, and to lead without ever losing peace. The world teaches noise before it teaches knowing. From an early age, you are told to seek identity in roles, titles, and achievements. Yet the deeper truth hides beneath all that noise. Strength begins when you no longer confuse who you are with what you do. Knowing yourself is not about building an image, it's about returning to what never changes, even when everything else does. To know who you are is to stand in quiet clarity while the world chases validation. You stop needing to be seen because you've already seen yourself. You no longer depend on mirrors that distort. You become your own reflection. This silent strength doesn't shout, it settles. It doesn't demand recognition. It emanates authenticity. Self-knowledge is not something you discover once. It's something you uncover daily. Each experience, each mistake, each season of solitude strips away another illusion until what's left is truth. And truth has no decoration. It's not dressed in perfection or achievement. It's simple, stable, unshaken. When you begin to live from that space, you stop searching for identity in movement. The silent strength of self-knowing doesn't resist chaos. It observes it. You understand that your peace is not a result of your environment, but the foundation you carry within it. You no longer chase control because you've met the self that cannot be controlled by circumstance. That awareness turns fragility into fortitude. Knowing who you are also means knowing who you are not. It's recognizing which roles were borrowed, which expectations were inherited, and which voices never belonged to you. The more you shed what isn't you, the lighter you walk. Identity becomes clarity, not confusion. You stop performing and start existing with quiet conviction. This kind of strength cannot be taught through theory, it's shaped in solitude. When you sit with yourself long enough, the masks begin to fall. The silence that once felt empty becomes full of guidance. You start hearing the subtle language of your own intuition, the voice that doesn't argue, only reminds. The person who knows themselves moves differently. They no longer compete with noise or prove through reaction. They carry calm into every space because they're no longer seeking belonging, they've already found it within. People feel their energy and recognize it as something rare, someone who is not trying to become anything, only to be. When you know who you are, rejection stops feeling personal. You understand that not being chosen doesn't mean you lack value. It means you don't belong where truth isn't ready to meet you. The opinions of others lose power because you no longer outsource your worth. Validation becomes irrelevant when self-acceptance becomes your foundation. The silent strength of self-awareness also sharpens boundaries. You stop saying yes out of fear and start saying no out of peace. You stop bending to keep connections that weaken your alignment. Knowing yourself teaches you that love without self-respect is dependency disguised as devotion. True connection can only meet you where you've met yourself. This inner knowing refines your energy. You start recognizing which spaces drain you and which restore you. You stop negotiating your presence for approval. Instead of adjusting your truth to fit the room, you begin adjusting the room with your truth. Quietly, you influence without effort, simply by being fully authentic. The grounded soul does not announce confidence, it emanates it. Confidence rooted in self-knowing doesn't waver with opinion or applause. You no longer need to convince others that you are enough, you live like it's a fact. That quiet certainty becomes magnetic. People are drawn to your peace because it reflects the stillness they long for within themselves. To know yourself deeply is to stop confusing stillness with stagnation. Growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. The deeper you go into self-understanding, the less you need to prove progress. You become less reactive, more reflective. That subtle shift is not weakness, it's evolution disguised as calm. The silent strength of self-knowledge doesn't come from never doubting. It comes from knowing how to return when you do. You stop running from uncertainty and start walking through it with patience. Doubt no longer destroys your confidence. It deepens your trust. You realize that even when you feel lost, you are only being refined. When you know who you are, comparison fades. You stop measuring your path by someone else's pace. You begin to see that life unfolds differently for each soul, and speed means nothing without direction. The calm mind no longer chases milestones, it seeks meaning. You grow slower but deeper, quieter but stronger. This strength also changes how you handle conflict. You stop fighting to be understood and start choosing peace over persuasion. You realize that silence is sometimes the most powerful expression of truth. You don't shrink, you simply stop explaining what is already evident in your energy. Knowing yourself allows you to forgive differently. You see that others act from their own confusion, not from clarity. You release resentment not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. Forgiveness stops being an act of weakness and becomes an act of wisdom, a recognition that holding pain only keeps you from your own balance. The silent strength within you doesn't depend on circumstance, it grows through it. Challenges no longer threaten your identity, they reveal it. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me about myself?" Every hardship becomes a mirror showing you the depth of your resilience. The more you embody who you are, the less you fear losing anything. Jobs, relationships, approval, they stop defining you. You realize that anything aligned with your truth will stay, and anything that leaves was never meant to remain. That understanding turns loss into liberation. Self-knowledge is not the end of the journey, it's the ground beneath every step forward. Once you know who you are, life stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like creation. You begin to move with grace, speak with clarity, and act with purpose. You lead not through authority, but through alignment. And in the quiet of that realization, you finally understand strength has never been about how much you carry, but about how deeply you stand in yourself. You no longer need to shout your truth into the world. Your peace has become your voice, and it speaks louder than words ever could. That is the silent strength of knowing who you are. In a world that rewards noise, owning your calm is the quietest form of rebellion. Inner authority isn't about control, status, or being untouched by chaos. It's about remembering that peace is your natural state, not a reward you earn. The more you trust your stillness, the less the world can shake you. You stop performing power and begin to embody it. The journey of inner authority is not about becoming someone new, it's about unlearning everything that made you doubt yourself. You realize that wisdom doesn't live in reaction, but in reflection. Strength doesn't shout, it breathes slowly. Influence doesn't demand, it flows. The deeper you move into calm, the more magnetic you become, because your energy speaks the language people have forgotten how to hear. Owning your calm means learning to pause before responding, to listen before judging, to breathe before deciding. It's the moment your awareness becomes your weapon and your softness becomes your shield. You no longer need to chase respect when your energy commands it naturally. You begin to see that the greatest authority is not over others, it's over your own mind. Inner authority is the alignment between truth and action. It's how presence replaces performance, how silence begins to carry meaning, how peace turns into persuasion. You no longer prove yourself through reaction, you reveal yourself through restraint. The world may stay loud, but you stop needing to rise above it. You start vibrating beneath it, steady and unbothered. The person who owns their calm becomes a lighthouse in motion, standing still even while the waves crash. Your strength is not in resistance, but in radiance. You influence not through control, but through consistency. And in that state, life begins to move differently around you. You stop pushing, you start drawing, you stop striving, you start being. And maybe that's the final lesson. Authority was never about dominance. It was about depth. It was about coming home to the still space inside you that no noise can touch. The calm mind leads, the grounded heart heals, and the aware soul commands without trying. That is times, the art of inner authority. Asterisk. So when the world rushes, pause. When it shouts, stay quiet. When it tries to pull you off center, return to your breath. Because your calm is not a reaction, it's your signature. It's who you become when you stop asking for permission to be at peace and finally realize you already are.